Hello, everybody. This is Jared, the non-alcoholic aficionado, and I'm here today with Jon Eggleton from Nation Beer to review and discuss NA beer coming from Go Brewing. We have first off the salty AF Chelada, the Prophets Hazy IPA, and the Burn It Down IPA. Jon is a NA enthusiast. We both share the love of NA beer, and on today's call we'll be walking through a number of kind of back and forth questions. It'll be an interview style, learning about Jon, learning about how we have both kind of become influencers in the space and see where the conversation takes us. So Jon, with that, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, first off, Jared, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to this. So, yeah, as Jared mentioned, I'm Jon Eggleton. I'm the principal of Nation Beer, chief optimist, as I like to say. And I started the site about a year or so ago, and really just, from an interest in NA beer, as Jared obviously shares with me as well. And just wanted to, as I learned more about it, it really reminded me a lot of the craft beer industry when, the overall craft beer industry really took off, say, 20, 25 years ago. And it's obviously grown up quite a bit. It's not your father's NA category, as a lot of people have said. It's not O'Doul's and Sharps and, the pure replacements anymore. And it's, just very excited about what's out there. Love to talk about it, love to have conversations like these, and just love to share my love of NA beer with people like Jared.
Definitely. And I know there's going to be a lot of folks out there that are viewers and listeners of your content and like mine. I know we'll get this out to the masses on LinkedIn and so forth. So I'm excited for this conversation. Should we kick things off with the Salty AF Chelada from Go Brewing?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Go for it. I have to do my best not to spill this on any of my office equipment at my desk here.
The trials and tribulations of having a podcast, right?
Yep. Figure it out as you go. I will say I talk about can art a lot when I do my reviews of Go Brewing, but their stuff is just, it's a step above the rest. Like this Dia de los Muertes like skull thing with the guitar and all that. It's just cool. Like, I think some breweries maybe take it as more of an afterthought, but Go definitely was above and beyond when it comes to the cans.
No, for sure. And as you know, I mean, every type of beer has a story as well, so they do a really great job with that.
For sure. Have you tried this one yet before?
I have. In fact, I had this one at the brewery for the first time when I was there about a month or so ago, and I've had it, I think, once since then. So,
cool.
Cheers.
Cheers, Jon.
That's a great summer beer.
It is phenomenal. I feel like I should be at my pool, which is about 50 feet that way downstairs. This is a great pool beer.
Yeah, I feel like I should have some tortilla chips and salsa somewhere with it, so I agree with that.
That does sound nice. Maybe some queso.
Yeah, that would be great.
So it should be noted, the Chelada, Salty AF Chelada, is a lager-style beer with undernotes of salt, but also a heavy dose of lime. The lime juice is very pronounced, in my opinion at least. You can really taste it. I think it accents that light lager flavor profile and crispness quite well. And like you said, it kind of makes you think of summer right off the bat.
Yeah. No, it's just very different. I mean, obviously, a chelada like this is going to be a little bit unique to begin with, but I think just the combination of flavors and just has a really great flavor profile. And like I said, this to me is it feels like a very food-friendly beer, especially for if you're going to be eating during the summer, whether it's grilling out or, like we said, if you're having tortilla chips and queso. That sounds great to me. I actually cracked one of these open on 4th of July. It just felt like a very good festive 4th of July beer, so I think it works there as well.
So, Go Brewing, you were just there. I listened to the podcast with you and Joe Chura. I around that same time had connected with Joe and became an ambassador for Go. So I've been, working with folks locally here in Minnesota to help them bring the brand on and kind of grow the footprint in Minnesota for Go Brewing. And when I listened to your guys' podcast, it was eye-opening just to kind of get from the perspective of yourself and Joe, where the brand is going, what the brewery's all about, the taproom experience, and all that. So could you maybe tell us a little bit about that experience you had with Joe?
Yeah, no, it was great to sit down with him. And, as we talked about in the podcast, I think one of the interesting things about him is his business background and what he brings really to this category in particular. And I think his passion for building this brand and what it could be. And, I kind of laughed and I ended up making it part of the title for the actual episode. But, I know initially they talked a lot about being, the best beer in the Midwest. And, they're in Chicago, great beer town in general.
Yep.
And so, we talked a little bit about that, and I asked him if that was still the goal. And he was like, that was, Midwest was swapped out for Planet, I think is what he said a few months back, around the beginning of the year. So it was really cool just to, feel the energy in there. And before we jumped on the podcast, I got a little tour of the facilities there. They're actually expanding in the Naperville area, which is definitely not shocking for anyone who's been following them. Got a chance to meet his brother briefly, who works there as well, and you really got a sense that it's not just a family operation. Obviously, it's beyond that, but there's definitely the culture there is strong. The people there believe in the product. Everything from the tap room bartender to people that I encountered. I got to meet the brewer as well very briefly. Came by just as we were finishing up. But overall, it's a really cool experience, and really excited to see what Go looks like the next time I get a chance to go back to Chicago, because I have a feeling it's going to look a lot different than it does this time around.
Yeah, it's on my bucket list to get down there and meet the team and see the tap room and do my own content creation as well. What do you, in terms of visiting places like that and doing your podcast and getting stuff with the site, are you traveling quite often to do that? What's your process look like?
Yeah, so initially, I think the first one, well, I guess we've done 10 episodes. We're about to release the 11th tomorrow. And I think of those 10 or 11, about half of them have been in-person interviews, the other half have been remote interviews. I think whenever possible, we love to be in person, and I think getting more of the flavor, more of the experience, to sit down with somebody, across from them and get a chance to kind of tour the facility. I think just being in the same room just has a little different, a little more, connectivity to it. So I'm trying to do that as much as possible. Obviously it's not necessarily possible to get to everywhere and have every episode be that way, or not realistic. So we'll continue to have a mix of some that are remote or in person, but it just so happened with the summer, I had some other travels, including some other things that were planned, where I was able to add on in the case of Chicago, I added that onto a trip. I was already having to go to Kansas City for something else, and was recently in Pittsburgh, where I had a chance to sit down with Two Phrase Brewery and their open road bar there, their alcohol-free bottle shop. So, I had a chance to do that. And it's just really cool to sit down and hear how different parts of the country are embracing NA and, the movement, as we say, and what they're doing to really drive it forward. I mean, everybody's got their own story. Some have come from hospitality, some have not. I think so far in our interviews, more have not actually been on that side. So it's just been a lot of fun, just whether it's doing it remotely like this or being able to sit with somebody in person, but definitely prefer the latter if I can.
For sure. Yeah, I've met with a number of, I think, 3 breweries locally here in Minnesota, and then the ABV Technology tour I did. They're the local company that does the de-alcoholization with vacuum distillation with their equalizer machine. That was really fun, and I want to keep doing those and kind of connecting and getting in touch with the folks that are taking this head on and realizing that people want something that's craft. They don't want a simple light lager, which is fine, but also having something that's unique and maybe takes a riff on a light lager and takes it up a notch, like the Chelada, like that type of craftsmanship that goes into making an NA beer that stands out is what people are gonna in my opinion, latch onto versus, wanting to, maybe not even going to the establishment because there's not something for them. I was
Right.
at a restaurant recently talking to them about Go Brewing, and the gal said that she had kind of gotten away from beer for the past 5 years, but she tried it. So she tried the NA Sour, the Sunshine State IPA, and the Not Just Another Story Double IPA, and she loved all three of them. And she was like, "This tastes like real beer, but obviously it's NA. It's real beer. It's just not alcoholic beer." So you kind of get I like getting those reactions where people are like, "Wow, that is really good." Like I'm used to that one time I tried O'Doul's Amber, and it tasted like not good. So it's been doing this little side gig for the ambassadorship locally in the last chunk of time it's been fun getting those eye-opening experiences and seeing firsthand somebody that they try that sour and they're like, wow, all the sours I've ever had were they weren't like this. So it's been fun doing
Right.
that. So that
Yeah.
kind of has been the latest part of the process for myself. But going back, like what from your perspective, John, like what started your NA journey? Did you stumble upon NA beer after kind of like a sober October or a dry January? Like how did you get into the space?
Yeah. So it started, as I know it does for other people as well. It originally kind of started related to a health event for me. So
Yep.
I went through a series of surgeries in 2021, 2022. Everything's great now. Fortunately, it wasn't anything that was a life-threatening situation. But I think just going through the impact of that for me,
Yeah.
and going into the second half of my 40s, it just caused me to recalibrate my health a little bit. And so I'd always been a runner, and so I always felt like because I've always been a runner and active that on the other end of things I could kind of do what I wanted. From a eating. Well, I mean I would try to eat reasonably well, of course, but I
Yeah.
think from an eating and drinking standpoint, it was easy to say or make an excuse when you're active, and when you get to your 40s,
Yep.
it hits you a little bit differently. So that was really what did it for me. And I occasionally still have some alcohol, but at this point, it's very, very infrequent. I mean, 95% of what I
Yeah.
drink is NA, and I really don't feel like I'm missing anything in that respect. But it was a
For sure.
process, and you were talking about that a moment ago. I mean, just for people to wrap their head around, and I think Joe and I talked about sours even, which you mentioned. I mean, people think about NA, they think about O'Doul's, they think about it as a replacement product, and so it's
Yep.
first getting them there to realize it's not. And then I think the second piece of that is just the innovation in the category, which we've already seen in the
Right.
craft beer space overall with getting into sours and all the different flavors, and what's really driven the American craft beer movement itself over the past 20 or 25 years. So it takes a few
Yep.
steps, but it is great to kind of see that light bulb. And it was the same for me. I mean, I picked up a six pack of NA beer, and I won't say which one it is to show favoritism anywhere, but I picked one up, probably put it back down on that shelf at least 2 or 3 times, and then eventually went back to it and tried it and was like, oh, that's actually really good. And
Yeah.
I just kind of changed my perception a little bit of how I might drink it, and very soon after that, it became primarily what I was drinking.
Yeah. I too had a health event in 2017, which was my first go at um, abstaining from alcohol, and it was tricky because that was far back enough that I didn't really realize non-alcoholic beer was an option, and no one was talking about it. I didn't have any friends that were alcohol free, and I was just kind of drinking sparkling water and Diet Coke and iced teas and all that, and then it was probably 2020. I stumbled upon Hop Water, the Lagunitas Hoppy Refresher, and I latched onto that because I was like, "Oh, this tastes kind of like beer, but it doesn't have any calories and any alcohol content, so it seems safe." I didn't realize that NA beer had less alcohol in it than a banana or a can of orange juice. I didn't realize that. I thought that the 0.5% was, gonna infringe on my, sobriety or whatever you want to call it. But it was last fall around October, and I don't know what gave me the idea to do it. But I started dabbling around trying NA beer, and I latched on and fell in love with it. And my first video was October 28th, 2023, and now I'm just past the 8-month mark, and I've reviewed 83 beers and put out like 52 videos, and it's been a fun journey. Like I've learned a lot going from that first video to the ones I just posted about Go Brewing last week. The content is totally different. Like the quality of the editing and all that stuff I've learned throughout the last 83 beers is exciting, and I don't know where that's going to be in the next 83 beers. Like I hope that the process continues to evolve, and more of this type of conversation happens where there's value to be driven with the education side and the story element of other people's journeys. So yeah, it's a fun and exciting space, and I think you mentioned too, it's the optimism behind it. Like people that are like the ones I've connected with on like Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn for that matter, where I connected with you. People are just so excited about finding something for them and finding something they can latch onto that's healthy and has a inherent value to not be a replacement, but to be something they can enjoy when they're out with friends that are still that still drink alcohol. So it's just, I don't know, since October last year, it's been a fun process. I've made lots of good connections. Obviously, made the tie to connect with you on LinkedIn, and I don't see a sign of stopping. I think the movement's going to just continue to develop, and maybe there's going to be an NA brewery pop up in Minnesota, which would be super cool. I don't know who's going to do it, but someone probably will. I think we're going to see more Go Brewings out there. I have a feeling.
Yeah, no, I definitely, that's all great, and love your content and what you're doing out there and putting out there with your videos and the different beer reviews. Funny story that to me just kind of illustrates, since we're talking about Go here, that kind of illustrates just how early we are in the whole process, is I was recently on the same road trip where I ended up coming down through Pittsburgh. I came up through Kentucky, and I was near Louisville, and I looked on, I knew that Go had recently gotten distribution in Kentucky. I think it's one of their newer states that they've moved into in the past couple of months. And so I knew that that I would be able to find Go in the stores there. So I was staying at a hotel near, in a place called Shepherdsville, just south of Louisville. Went on the Go Brewing site, looked at the beer finder, found a liquor store that showed up on the beer finder. So I went there, and again, this is, they probably only recently in the last few weeks or months, have gotten Go Brewing in the store. Yeah. So I'm sure it's a very new product for them. And I walked in there, walked around the whole beer aisle, didn't see it anywhere, went through the cooler or past the cooler, didn't see it in any of the displays that you can grab. I went into the, they called it the beer cave, which is basically like the overflow for all the cold beer. Yep. Walked in there, and I found they had both, I think, Sunshine State, and I can't remember if it was Sunbeam, the Pilsner, or not just another story, the double IPA. I think it might have been the double IPA. They had 3 6-packs of both of those. They were shoved up against a wall. You couldn't even see the label or what they were. And I remember the woman, I was kind of in there for a while because I'm like, it's got to be here. And so I came out with a 6-pack of, I think, Sunshine State. And she was like, oh, did you find everything you needed? And I kind of waved the 6-pack, like, yeah, this is what I was looking for. Sort of looked like I've never seen that before. And, and I think all that tells me is just how new all of this stuff is, that, these are people who are in the business. They did have other NAs in the store, and, they're just beginning to wrap their head around what it looks like. But I'm pretty confident I was the first person to buy Go in that particular store.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm part of what I'm running into with these conversations I'm having locally is the sentiment around one is okay. Like these places are, they might carry one NA beer and they're like, yeah, we have NA. It's like, okay, well, if I went into a bar and the only beer I could have at that bar as a standard beer drinker was a Coors Light, would I be a satisfied customer? Probably not. I might want an IPA, and if they didn't have it, then I might not go there. So it's like it's having that conversation and like educating through, for yourself, like on your site and your podcast and me on my videos and posts and whatnot, like the variety is out there. The options are diverse, and they're constantly evolving and growing and becoming more readily available. Not just beer, but ready to drink cocktails. There's NA wine, there's cider, there's all, like spirits. All that stuff is becoming more widespread, and I think it's just a matter of time with people realizing it and starting to ask for it when they're out at these locations. It's gonna. I think we're gonna hit a stride, and I don't know when it's gonna happen, but I feel like very soon people are gonna start asking, and it's gonna start becoming more available.
No, I agree, and I think you hit on one of the challenges for the industry right now is I think that perception of we have an NA beer, we have one, and I think some of that is maybe left over from the O'Doul's legacy where it was just a replacement thing and it wasn't something that people bought to necessarily enjoy or that they would come to a restaurant or bar for it. It was more of I'm not drinking now for whatever reason and I need something to sip on while I'm sitting here. And so I think that, and I also think just people need to see, and I think will, just like anything else in craft beer. I mean, it's all about choice. We might be drinking this today, and the next week I might be on to sours or want to try something else, or it depends on what I'm doing or what I'm eating or what else is going on. And so I think that whole concept of choice is really going to come into play. And then I think one last point on it, I think related to all of what we're talking about here, would kind of just sort of be the idea of putting it on the actual menu. So I mean, that's another issue altogether. And I know you've had some conversations with restaurants there in Minnesota and trying to get them to be open-minded about it. But I've been in many restaurants, as I'm sure you have, where they have an NA, but they don't even put it on the menu. So it's sort of like, well, if I walk into a deli and you don't show that you have a tuna sandwich, do you expect me to try to order a tuna sandwich? I mean, I'm not going to order it if I don't see it on the menu. And for whatever reason, people don't seem to be there yet with NA beer, but they've got to be getting there soon.
I totally agree. I think the writing's on the wall when you consider how many people are starting to try out the sober curious mindful drinking lifestyle, or thinking about their health, or maybe they're of a religious faction that can't have alcohol, or they're pregnant, or they're there with a friend that doesn't drink and they want to be a comrade to them, or whatever. There's so many equations, there's so many scenarios that the dollars are out there to be had for folks that want to provide variety. It's just a matter of whether or not they're willing to to latch onto it. So out of curiosity, John, actually, where are we at with beer? Are you almost done with your first one?
Yeah, I'm about done here. We can move on.
Okay. What's your most memorable interaction with the work you've done with your site and your podcast, in terms of like people being like, oh hey, like I saw this, like it made me want to go try this beer and I did and I loved it, like thank you? Or have you had like friends be like, hey, like I don't drink anymore either, I think we were friends 20 years ago, like I like your content, like have you had any of those stories?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say from the podcast in particular, so one thing that's been kind of cool, and especially since I did some recently in person, is some of the people that I've talked with or interviewed have they've heard some of the previous episodes. They're also listeners of the podcast, so they'll mention something from an earlier episode, and they kind of know what the format is, I guess, a little bit there as well. But I mean, I think it has been just really interesting, seeing the light bulb, I think, go on for some people, and have some of those conversations with people about how they feel about the category has been definitely really eye-opening. And I think as far as what's been most memorable, I've had a few people who are listeners of the podcast reach out and want introductions to people I've interviewed. Maybe it's a bottle shop.
Oh, cool.
I've had people who are like, hey, I'm actually interested in opening a store for this stuff, and I've really been inspired by the stories that I'm hearing on your podcast. And it's the people I'm interviewing, who have these stories that I'm just trying to bring to light. And so, I've been able to connect some of those people, and some of those things I think are still in process where they're working on their ideas and what they could do. But that's been really meaningful. If I can help people make those connections, I mean, I think that's a big thing with this industry is, it's still a pretty small industry at this point. We'll see how long it stays that way. but I think just everybody, helping each other out and being able to contribute to that in different ways, I think has been really cool. So it's been fun just to be a part of that.
Definitely. Yeah, I've had a couple friends from years back that have reached out and they're like, "Hey, I saw your content on LinkedIn where you talked about your sobriety and tackling the world of NA beer through your videos and posts and whatnot. Like, I don't drink anymore, and maybe we shouldn't have had so many beers back in the day." And like, they're at the stage now where they family and kids and all that, and they're like, it's not a part of my life anymore, and I'm happy to see that you're on a positive path as well. So those are the kind of the eye-opening ones where it's like, what I'm doing out there maybe is giving people a little bit of a positive, uplifting point of view, and maybe it's the 1% of the 10,000 views I've had of my content where somebody decides maybe I'll go try that NA beer. Maybe it could be the substitute that's going to help me to maybe drink a little bit less. There's a lot of positives that come from the work that you and I and other NA beer and enthusiasts are doing. So it's exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
We've got the Prophet's Hazy IPA up next. This is beer number 2. If you didn't watch part 1, pull it out to the channel, check that out. It'll make more sense as we kind of go into this next conversation around the Prophet's Hazy IPA. So cheers to that. Give it a pour.
Cheers.
I've had this one, but it's been months, so I'm excited to try it again. I had to go track it down.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat. It's been a while since I've had this one.
Yeah. So we've got a bike trail or a road, and again, cool can art coming from Go Brewing. It's fairly hazy. Cannot see through that beer.
Nope.
Give it a cheers. Cheers, John.
Cheers.
It makes me think of the Sunshine State IPA, but then it doesn't have that fruity, bitter aftertaste. It was very, very similar though. I just had that today.
Yeah. And on the first sip, I thought the same thing. It's got a little bit of the tropical flavors, but they don't hit you as hard as they do on the finish with the Sunshine for sure.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
But,
the first time I had this, the first time I had this one, I hadn't had the Sunshine State yet, so I didn't have that comparison to do. Oh, this one, it's interesting. This one has lactose just like the Sunshine State does. Interesting.
Huh.
So let's see. We've got a hazy IPA from Go. We did drink the part 1 was a salty AF Chelada. We've got the Burn It Down IPA coming up next. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Helps me grow, helps us get more viewership out there, helps John's site and podcast grow as well as we kind of cross-pollinate our methods and our content here. And John, I'm curious, what from your experience and all the work you've done and all the research you've done, what trends are you seeing? What's popping right now? What do you think is going to come around the corner here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in terms of what people are buying, I think it was a really interesting conversation when we were down in Lafayette, Indiana, talking with Rob at Generation NA, and the way that he explained kind of the functional beverages versus the one-to-one replacements. And he talked about how when he sees Gen X or boomers that come in there, it tends to be like, hey, can you give me something that tastes like a bourbon, or what's a good beer for me to try?
Yeah.
And the younger generation, either Gen Z or the younger millennials, are going in there, and they're like, hey, I need something for focus, or I need something just to chill. So I think that obviously will continue to play out. I think we've probably barely scratched the surface, especially on the adaptogen side of things, and so I think that will definitely continue to infiltrate on the beer side, if we're talking about NA beer specifically. I know a lot of people who may either use marijuana might prefer a non-alcoholic beer because they don't want to mix they don't want to mix alcohol with whatever else, with marijuana or anything else that they might be smoking. And so they see it as a safer alternative. So, especially with, I think, some of the younger demographics. So I think, we'll see a lot of activity and things happening around that. But I'll take that question back to, I think, more the business side. I think we'll definitely see, and I know we talked about this a little bit in part one as well, with restaurants seeing the business potential about it. I just had an interview with Two Phrase Brewery in Pittsburgh, and they talked about NA is now 5 to 10% of their total revenue, and it's about 25% of their wholesale business, which is really huge when you think about it. And if you think about a lot of smaller breweries, the biggest obstacle they see to getting into NA is they just feel like it's too expensive to get into, and they just don't think they can move beer fast enough. And obviously they've, in Pittsburgh there, they've proven that is not the case. So I think that will change perceptions, and I think as it continues to grow, it's going to be a rising tide lifts all boats, where you'll see someone obviously like a Go who's just crushing it in the NA space and introducing new beers, and just continue to see that growth pattern, as some of the smaller regional breweries complement that. And I think that will hopefully help more restaurants and bars get over the hump of having the choice, where it's not just having a lonely Heineken 0.0 or whatever they choose to have as their sole NA option, but they realize that it should be more of a lot of different options for people to pick from.
Yep. I gotta say, having that Heineken 0.0 over nothing is a game changer, because you at least get to experience something tasty alongside your friends and family that might be drinking a Coors Light or something. So I don't mind the Heineken, but I agree it's nice to have that variety. I think you're hitting the nail on the head with the restaurants and bars component. I think there's so much money to be made from the business perspective for folks that want to latch on to a more diverse offering set for their patrons. So I'm excited to see where that goes. I just locally here, been in places where they've got like a nice like arcade environment, or they've got pinball games, or they've got pool and darts and all that, and it's like, I'd love to just hang out here for a few hours and play games, but I'd also like to have a drink in my hand that tastes good. So I think that's coming. Curious, John, what's your so I guess I don't know for sure, how long have you been doing the work on the website, the podcast? How long has that been?
Yeah, so it's actually only been a year. In fact, it'll be exactly a year at the end of this month. So coming
nice.
up on our year. Yep.
Very cool.
Yep.
And what's been your most memorable article or experience? I think I saw one that was about like the beer mile. I think that one jumped out to me.
Yeah, the running content is fun. I'm a runner, so I think that was really where I started with it, is I wanted to do more around running. I've kind of gotten away from that a little bit as the podcast part kind of took off, and it seemed like there were some really interesting stories to tell there. Starting to come back to the running side and maybe incorporate that into more of the things that we're doing there. But no, it's been fun. Definitely the in-person interviews for the podcast, I would say, have been the most memorable.
Yep.
Asheville, for example, it's a great beer town for anybody who hasn't been there. It's about a 4-hour drive from where I am in Atlanta, and it's it's the East Coast headquarters of New Belgium. Sierra Nevada has a very large facility there. I think most of their beer that gets sent around the East Coast is made there. Same for New Belgium. They've got Burial.
Cool.
Wicked Weed, started there before I think they were acquired by AB InBev, or one of the bigger players, a number of years ago. But
Yep.
Big beer town, probably anywhere in the neighborhood of, I think, 60 or 70 breweries in a pretty small mountain town. And so, having gone there and been to all the breweries, or not all of them, but been to many of the breweries in the past myself, it was just fun to go back there through an NA lens. We spent some time at Burial Beer, who I interviewed for the episode. Doug Reeser is one of the co-founders, and was really just struck by the authenticity from him around the space, and what he had to say about the category, And he was almost, I think, disappointed himself that nobody else, at least at that point, and I think still to this day, there's no other Asheville-based brewers, unless Sierra Nevada, of course, has their trail pass, but they're not headquartered in Asheville specifically. Any of the really local guys, he's the only one who's doing an NA, and he typically has two that rotate on draft. And so, he almost, I think, felt offended that no one else, has tried to do it or reached out to him for advice, and which, is good for him. It gives him all of that NA business right. But we got to the end of the interview, and I remember I was just finishing up. I think I edited this out of the actual episode, but I said to him, "Is there anything else you want to say about this that I haven't already asked you?" And he said, "No, honestly, I didn't think I had this much to say about NA in the first place." And he talked about how he appreciated the engagement and all that. But I think it just speaks to, you get in front of somebody, and he's a beer guy. He's an NA beer guy as well, but he's primarily a beer guy, a brewery owner. And it's not something he necessarily thinks about every day, but the pride he felt. They've got several bartenders who are completely sober, and the fact that when they have the 3:00 staff meeting and everybody kind of gathers around the table, those, they can participate and feel included and grab an NA and drink a beer along with everybody else. And he just had a lot of pride around that, and that's probably been one of my favorite interviews. I think just kind of seeing that aha moment from him as he was talking about all this out loud.
Very cool. Yeah, I think one of the first it was actually the first brewery tour I did was at a local Minneapolis St. Paul location called Badger Hill, and it was like, I don't know, maybe my 6th or 7th video, and I had initially had the idea to just have a quick interview with the owner and see the tap room, and it turned into a long conversation around their NAs, how they did it. We saw the process, toured the tap room, tried all 3 of their NA beers. They do theirs through ABV technology, and that experience allowed me to get in with ABV technology and do a tour of their facility. And therefore, I was able to go to Bauhaus Brewery, which works with ABV technology. So it's like the conversations and the connections and the networking that the work that I've done has allowed like the channel to grow. And having had conversation with Megan Anderson, who's works with the AF and the certification program, 2 days later I had a conversation with Joe from Go, and kind of kicked off this relationship. So it's like and then chatting with you on LinkedIn like led us to have this conversation today. So it's like I'm just my goal with continuing to grow the presence in the space is just to continue networking and seeing where things go and continue to build out content and continue just to raise awareness for what NA beer can be for somebody that is either just trying to add some variety to their regimen, or maybe move away from all having standard beers all the time. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's been a positive experience these past 8 months, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, and I'm curious, as part of being a brand ambassador for Go, I know you started having conversations with restaurants there, and aside from the ones who are like, yeah, we've got an NA, we've got our single NA that we offer. I mean, what kind of feedback, or what are they saying as far as what's their own vision for what their NA program should look like? I mean, do you find that they have one, or is it something they're just not thinking enough about yet?
I don't think they're there yet. The ones I've had legitimate like tastings and meetings with, one of them in particular, I met off a kind of a cold outreach, just popped on in, and the general manager was like, we don't have the ability to do anything new. And I was like, okay, well, have you ever tried it? And he was like, no. I was like, well, you should try it. See if you have any idea what it could be like. He tried the sour from Go Brewing, and he was like, wow, like that is really tastes like beer, and it tastes good. I was like, yeah, try this one. So he tried the Sunshine State, and he was like, wow. And then he tried the pills. He tried 4 of them, and he was like, I want to try to, see if I can talk the owners into taking this on, because it's really good. And so that 10-minute, tasting session went from him basically telling me to walk away to him potentially bringing on the NA beer from Go for their restaurants. And they have a couple locally. So I'd say it's getting over the hump of the friction, and it's like, I think if there's a placement and like even just trying one of the few beers that are distributed here locally and giving it a couple months stint of seeing if people like the flavor and I would reorder it. I think that's what it's gonna take. I don't think there's gonna be a huge like whirlwind of a ton of people latching on and getting all three flavors that are distributed and pumping it out and doing tastings and doing all that. I think that's going to take some time, but that's what I'm excited about. Well, from my perspective as an ambassador, to be that for that force that continues to kind of poke the bear and say, hey, have you rethought about the conversation we had 6 months ago? These are the people locally that have done this and they've made X amount of profit, or making up numbers and trying to say, hey, this is something that you should think about. So I think having those stories to tell about where the experience could be, stemming from having these on site and having the flavors available to the folks that don't drink or are trying to drink less or just want something non-alcoholic. I think those stories are going to be what really drive the uptake. So that's my analysis, at least.
Yeah, no, I think you used the word friction, which I think is a good word in this case, where we need to figure out a way to remove that and, inertia. People are just so accustomed to having, I'm going to have 6 or 7 different craft beers at any given time or whatever, or these are my go-tos and I'm going to add to that with this. And so anything that interrupts that status quo is always going to be difficult. But, I think as it's hopefully as it's happening at both ends, people like you going in there and convincing them and having them try it, which of course makes a huge amount of difference. They can see it for themselves or taste it for themselves. So that'll make a big difference. And then hopefully more people going in there and asking for the NA options that they're not seeing they want on the menus.
That's the other thing too, is the presence of local bottle shops. I'm surprised I didn't think of this earlier, but I have tastings coming up in the next few weeks with the 2 major bottle shops in Minneapolis. One is called Marigold and one is called Zero Proof Northeast, and one is Friday and one's in August. So they'll be Go Brewing focused and giving people a chance to kind of come in from 4 to 7 p.m. on a Friday night, and while they're they might be buying their NA wine, they'll see that there's a tasting for an NA beer. Maybe they haven't tried it. Maybe they'll see what it's all about. I'm very excited about those, because if I was somebody that never tried it and I was at a free tasting at a location that I felt comfortable at with exploring other beverages, that might be that person that shows up at the place like a local restaurant that I was at, and they say, hey, do you have this? And they're like, oh, that guy was just here 2 weeks ago and we told him to go pound sand. Maybe we'll reach out to him. Like, I think that's kind of the cadence that could happen long term. Obviously that's going to require word of mouth. That's going to require uptake when it comes to the bottle shops getting traction with their customers on any specific type of NA beer or NA beverage in general. But I think it's only a matter of time before people do start asking more and asking for brands that they've experienced on their own, whether it's from a bottle shop, whether it's from buying direct, whether it's buying from Amazon, whether it's the website, following up on an ad they found on Instagram or Facebook or wherever. Like these brands are getting themselves out there in front of people. It's only a matter of time before they're like, hey, maybe I'll try it. I had a friend of mine that I used to work with text me. He's like, hey, I was just at Total Wine in the NA section. I didn't buy anything, but they gave me a receipt that had a 15% off code to buy something non-alcoholic. He's like, this is interesting. Like, I saw your stuff. What should I get? And I was like, well, what do you like? So we chatted for a bit, and it was basically, he's like, yeah, I like Hazy IPA. So I was like, try this, or this. And I don't know if he's purchased yet, but it's interesting to see like that guy. I know he's a big beer guy. Like we when we worked together, we went to breweries and whatnot, and to have him thinking about something non-alcoholic is interesting, because maybe he'll like it. Maybe he'll incorporate that into his his cycle of consumption. So that stuff like that's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's great.
I like that one. That Profits Hazy IPA is maybe going to have to come into a rotation. I haven't had that in a long time.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. We have the Burn It Down left. Should we give that a go?
Yeah, let's do that.
We have the Burn It Down IPA as the next player. We're going to be tasting this, talking about it, talking about NA beer in general. So keep an eye out for part 1 and part 2. Maybe watch those before this one if you want to kind of hear the whole conversation, or just try this one too. Whatever works best for you. Give us a pour. So we've done the salty AF Chelada in part 1, and the Prophet's Hazy IPA was part 2. Now we've got the Burn It Down IPA. This one, just like the others, has some cool can art. Got the black backdrop with some flames. Pretty cool. And not as hazy as the Prophet's Hazy IPA, but it's got a nice color to it. Good head retention. Cheers.
Cheers.
It's more hoppy than the Hazy IPA, that's for sure.
Yep. Yeah, no, I this to me feels, I don't want to say it's more of a classic IPA, but it's definitely got the IPA hoppiness to it, which I enjoy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but a little less of the kind of citrusy, juicy flavors than the Prophets, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's less fruit forward, more hop focused, and I think it's got it says it's Cryo Centennial and Chinook hops. So there's I think it's a West Coast style, I want to say, and the I don't know if it's really touted on the website as having much of a citrus note to it, which makes sense, kind of what you described. So,
Yep, that's good.
Should be noted, there's actually 5 IPAs on the Go Brewing website. So if you're an IPA fan, you're in good company. I think there's 12 current NA beer offerings from Go, 5 IPAs, good selection of different things. Could you maybe highlight some of the takeaways when it comes to collaborations you've done, like with the maybe some of the folks you've done with podcasts with, or had a chance to meet with, or so forth? I'm just kind of curious there.
Yeah, so our site is almost a year old, nationbeer.com, and the podcast is about 6 months or so. Started that in January, and it's really given us the opportunity. We've interviewed a combination of non-alcoholic brewery owners, some bottle shop owners, and some traditional breweries as well. In fact, I'm probably most proud of the fact that trying to really bring in some of those stories as well, not just people who are inside the industry, but breweries who have chosen to go into that space. And so I think those have been some of our favorite episodes, just in terms of talking with them and what the category means to them. And I think it's also interesting just to talk to people like that who aren't thinking about it every day. I mean, you talk to a Joe at Go Brewing, and he could talk about it all day, and a lot of passion and what he's trying to build with the brand, which is awesome. But you talk to some of these, especially some of these smaller breweries where it's a part of their portfolio, and it's just a different perspective and in how they see the category and how people are interacting with it or interacting with the product when they're in the tap room. I mean, at this point, if you're a smaller brewery and you have an NA, you're still on the cutting edge of things. So there are definitely people who are in the know on that. But yeah, to answer your question, it's just been fun to see the variety of perspectives and how different people are really approaching this category.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think I've done 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be my 5th podcast style kind of interview conversation on the YouTube channel. And I think the one thing that's come forward as a topic of interest in these conversations is twofold. What's your favorite NA beer, and what's a beer that you wish would become an NA beer, whether it was through dealcoholization or some type of modified biological process for fermentation. So 2 questions. I've got my answers.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure you do. I would say, especially since we're talking about Go Brewing today, I would say their Sunshine State is definitely a favorite of mine. Has been for quite some time. I just think it's it's a great IPA. Just the tropical flavors that come out and the finish. I think that kind of sets it apart for me versus some of the other ones that are out there in the marketplace. So I really I feel like that's a beer that I could have by itself. That's a beer I could have with food, and that I could drink that in a lot of different situations. So that would be one thing. In terms of beers that I wish would have an NA version, there's not really one I could honestly say on a national level that I've just been dying that hasn't already been created. I mean, I know a lot of people talked about Blue Moon because that was a gateway for a lot of people to get into craft beer, and it was for me too. So that was exciting to get to try that. I still haven't had the Deschutes. They don't have really very good distribution in Georgia, so I've not tried their NA products as of yet. I know Sierra Nevada with the Trail Pass series. I would truthfully answer that question by saying I wish more of the local breweries around me had an NA. One of them does, Wild Heaven, which is a brewery in Avondale Estates here in the Atlanta area. It's a few miles away from me. They have launched an NA series, and I enjoy being able to go to the brewery and sip on one of those. They have them on draft usually when they have them. But there's another brewery that's right down the street, about 5 blocks from my house. My wife and I like to go there, and they don't have an NA. I've been working on them, but they haven't quite got it. And they have their reasons for that. So I would love to see an NA at every local brewery that I go to, just so people like myself can experience it, just like anybody else goes to a brewery. So that would be my wish.
Yep. I hear ya. So my favorite, I'm cheating. It's two. It's the sour from Go Brewing and the double IPA from Go Brewing. They're too close, and I've had so much of it lately with tastings and whatnot that they just jump out. The one I wish was made into an NA is a 10% double IPA from Bell's called the Hop Slam. It was like the holy grail of beers that I always got around my birthday. And they would push it out, and it would sell out. And it was at the time in like 2012, it was like $16.99 a 6-pack of 6 bottles, which for a college student is outrageous. That's like three to 4 times what I was spending on regular 6-packs that were probably expired. And it was just a treat, and obviously at 10% alcohol, it packs a punch on multiple levels. I looked it up recently because I was curious. It carries 294 calories for a 12-ounce can, which is outrageous. Like that's compared to the double IPA from Go. That's only 57 calories. It's like more than 5 times the amount of calories in one 12-ounce receptacle, which is just baffling. So if they took that 10% down to a 0.5, I would gobble that up for sure. That'd be fun.
Yeah. No, that's funny. No, it's there's been a few examples I could think of a beer in the alcohol world that translated pretty well to the NA. I know Speedway Stout from AleSmith, San Diego Brewery comes to mind. I think the original one is about a 10 or 11%, if I'm not mistaken, and they have an NA version of that, maybe a little different flavor profile, but it's exciting. When breweries put the work in to try to create a great product on the NA side, I think the results speak for themselves. But I remember Hop Slam from back in the day as well. I've had a few of those, and I did not realize 294 calories. I mean, I think of Go sometimes, some of their NAs are a little bit higher in the NA world, but to be nowhere near 294, that's just crazy.
I look back at college and I'm like, wow, I had that many beers of the standard variety and like a higher alcohol percentage, and then 8 afterwards, probably some pizza and some random stuff from McDonald's. I was probably throwing down a couple thousand calories in a drinking night easily. And how I bounced back from that the next day as a 22-year-old, I don't know. At 34 now, not drinking for almost 5 years, I don't know how I survived back in the day. But, I was young.
It's the magic of being 22, I guess. It's funny.
So what's your favorite out of the three? We had the salty AF Chelada, the Prophet's Hazy IPA, and the Burn It Down IPA. They're very well.
Yeah,
One of them is very
that's a good
different than the
question.
others. The two IPAs are pretty similar, um,
Yeah.
in the fact that they're both fairly hoppy. One's a little bit more citrusy, but what's your favorite?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say between the three, I might go with the Prophets. I think just it was a good. I almost look at it as it's almost like an in between of the one we're having, the Burn It Down, and Sunshine State, where it doesn't quite have
Yep,
as much
totally.
tropical fruit as Sunshine State, but it's got a little bit of a blend of the two. But I really like that, and
Yep.
like you, I had not had one of those in a few months, so that was kind of, I won't say a pleasant surprise. I knew it was good. I just couldn't remember exactly what it tasted like. So I would say that would be my favorite of these three.
I have to agree with you. I hadn't had it in some time as well, and I don't remember it being as good as it was today. And I think it might be because of the others I've had from Go, just comparing the profiles, like you mentioned, the Burn It Down versus the Hazy IPA versus, or the Sunshine State versus the Double. They all kind of have their niche. And this one, like you said, kind of it's like the Goldilocks almost. It brings in both the citrus and hoppy flavors without being overly, pronounced on any one front. So I really like this one. It was good. I think I
Yeah.
have a couple more in the fridge, so I'll be enjoying those.
Nice. It's always good
What's
to have some spare.
I don't know if you talk about upcoming things that often, but do you have anything exciting coming up? Maybe generally speaking, not spelling out what it's going to be, but do you have any like new podcasts or new content coming to the site?
Yeah, so I think I alluded to it before. We talk with Two Phrase Brewery in Pittsburgh and Open Road Bar,
Yep.
the alcohol-free bottle shop, and so we have that episode. It should be out tomorrow or Wednesday. I don't know when
Cool.
this will be coming out. So that to put dates against that, that would be
Yeah.
I guess July the 9th, possibly thereabouts. So excited about that one. I think one of the exciting things about that episode for us is real quick that relationship between Two Phrase and their bottle shop. So they partner together.
Yeah.
They do this thing called Mod Monday, which they do the first Monday of every month. It was a day in which the brewery used to not be open at all. So they were closed on
Okay.
Mondays. One Monday a month they reopen, but they're entirely an alcohol-free brewery or alcohol-free bar. So they bring in the alcohol-free bottle shop who does a kind of a pop-up store. They have their NAs that are there on draft. They usually put a local mocktail on draft as well, so something that's made from somebody who's done that locally. And you can't even get their regular alcohol stuff there. They take everything out. They redo the entire menu board. I mean, they just kind of remake the brewery into
Wow,
a
that's
non-alcoholic space. And they were telling me that they've had people drive in from Chicago or other cities,
Wow.
and they've had people in tears, who are like, "Wow, this is so great," and it crushes. So it's one of those things where it makes sense from a people person, but also a financial side as well. And so hopefully
Yeah.
something like that will become a model. So we're excited about that episode. And beyond that, hoping to get back to a little bit more running content. That's something we got away from a little
Yeah.
bit. And further out, we're working on some ideas, some ways to partner and be able to help non-alcoholic brands on the B2B side. So I have a background in marketing, so we're looking at some different ways to offer help in really getting the word out, obviously, about the category and about these different brands. So we'll have that hopefully coming
Cool.
up before the end of the year. So yeah, lots of good stuff.
Nice. Yeah, I think I'm most excited about the tastings at the bottle shops coming up because I've never done that before, and the two spots are just really cool and unique environments. One is very small, and they have like a little stand-up bar that's maybe 6 feet to 8 feet long, and they serve any beer on tap. They've got wine in the fridge. They've got mocktails they can make with things like the spiritless Kentucky 74 with some bitters and some they'll make an old fashioned. But doing the tasting there and then at zero proof over the next few weeks is I think going to be really fun. On a high repetition, perspective of getting people's insights as they taste, maybe a Go Brewing for the first time. I'm excited to see how that goes. And my plan, I don't know how it's going to work, but my plan is to try to document it throughout. Maybe I'll have someone like with camera and mic, like kind of documenting people's first takes and their reactions. So I got to figure out that component and how that's going to work. But I'd like to have those reactions on camera if the people are okay with it, obviously. So I'm excited for those tastings, and then also I've got 2 more podcasts planned for the next 2 weeks. So I'm gonna have a ton of editing to do. Editing with doing auto captions for hour-long sessions takes a while because there's, you know, I think the first one I did had like 1,000 caption lines, so each one takes like a couple seconds to load because the file is so big. So that'll be my project for the next couple weeks probably. But beyond that, just excited to see what else is out there. I might tap into the Bendician bottle shop for some of the mash gang beers that aren't available stateside necessarily, unless you get through the right channels, because I like their stuff. And then stuff like the AleSmith Speedway. I have not tried that yet, so I might need to tap into Proof No More to try some one-offs and kind of broaden the horizons of the other brands. So plenty of fun stuff to do. So plus trying to get local spots and Go Brewing. So all good
That's
stuff.
great. I was gonna, so I'll be interested to hear your feedback after you do the samplings at the alcohol-free bottle shops. And it sounds like you guys have a couple of great options. We do here as well in Atlanta. I did a similar beer sampling with one of the ones here called Soberish. But I think in general, I feel like through the faults of no one, I do feel like sometimes the NA beer could get overshadowed in those bottle shops around the country a little bit. And, there's some obvious exceptions to that. And I don't know if it's because there's just a lot of media attention on the cocktail, mocktail side, or just NA beer is maybe it just requires less explanation. I mean, people get it's a beer, it's a beer without alcohol, even though there's a lot to say about it. But it does feel, I don't know if you feel the same or if you've seen that, but it does feel like it's easy to get lost. So it's great to see you participating and doing some of those samplings to get people to try the beer, and if they may have walked in there looking for something else.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of, at least in Minnesota, a lot of hype around the marijuana and THC offerings because it's legal in the state now and it's pretty fresh and new. I know folks that love it and they consume it quite often. I know folks that have tried it and it doesn't really vibe with their system. They don't have positive experiences. So I think that's going to continue to progress. Interestingly, like some breweries are taking on their own versions, which I don't know how that works. Like if you have a marijuana derived THC beverage, but then you go back up 15 minutes later and order a double IPA, like how do they track what you're taking in? Like that whole thing still seems kind of off to me. I don't know how that's going to play out long term. But yeah, no, I think, and then you got the functional beverages as well. Those are pretty popular. And then I think the ready to drink cocktails are pretty prevalent in these bottle shops as well. So I think there's a lot of folks that come in maybe not knowing what NA beer really could mean to them, and they may be drawn to some of the newer, more flashy stuff. So I'm excited to maybe open up some eyes and say, hey, you're about to go buy that a THC beverage. Maybe try this NA beer and see if you like that as well. You might find that they play off each other quite nicely, like you said earlier, in the sense that maybe you want to have a little bit more. You want to drink more, but you don't want to have 2 THC beverages. Maybe you have a THC beverage and then a non-alcoholic, IPA or something. So, interested to see how those conversations go. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's great. So,
well, I'm about to wrap up my beer. I don't know how you're at with yours, but I've really enjoyed this conversation, John. Like I said to the viewers, this is part 3. We'll have 3 chunks of content coming out. I don't know when, but it'll be coming out soon. So keep an eye out for part 1, 2, and 3, and look up. Go to the description of any of these to go to John's site where his podcasts are held. I'll also have the link to my side of the equation with the Go Brewing link, where you can use my code GoJared for 15% off any beer from the Go Brewing website. And in terms of the overall conversation, really appreciate everybody for joining and watching today, whether it's part 1, 2, and 3 or part 3 or whatever you're watching. So thanks for that. Thanks for subscribing, and thank you again for John for joining, and hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Thanks.